Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 79. Cristina, Samoila. She shares her secrets to growing a business faster and being more productive. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are with Cristina, Samoila. And now you pronounce it. Did I do okay?
It's perfect.
Awesome. Well, we were going to think about just calling her, Cristina Smith the rest of so it was, easier for this guy to pronounce. But okay. But so Cristina her whole thing is systems and processes and helping other businesses implement systems and processes into their business and coaching and helping people. Is that about right?
Yeah, very broadly.
In a nutshell? Yes.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So, but welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So we're going to talk about kind of where I think a really good place to start is as we kind of weave our way towards these topics is to kind of how you landed on caring about systems and processes. And I would imagine oftentimes when we start to do things ourselves, it's because we ran into issues in our business or when we were building something and we suddenly realized this is a solution that is, giving me my time back or helping me, be a much more well-oiled machine or whatever. Is that kind of how it played out for you when you started your business, or how does that look?
Yeah, somewhat. You know that there's a quote running around the internet. I think it was like Steve Jobs or someone who said, "If I would rather hire a lazy person because they'll find a faster way to do something." Yes. That's pretty much me. Not to call myself lazy or anything, but like 7 years ago, I was working for this company. I was just in the customer service department. I was just like minding my own business, doing things as they taught them to me, and I was spending like a lot of hours just reaching out to people and following up and all of the customer service stuff. And like one day I was just poking around in the software that we were using for our customer service desk, and I stumbled onto the automation side of it, and I'm like, a lot of the stuff that I have to do every single day can be automated with this feature. I'm like, So like I thought on it for a couple of days, and then I started building it, and as soon as I built it, I realized I was saving myself like kind of like a couple of hours every day, because that's how we were like at the end of the shift. Our manager told us, hey, at the end of the shift, make sure that you reach out to everybody who hasn't replied back to a ticket in like 24 or 48 hours, and you follow up with them before you leave. And I'm like, fine. And there was a high volume of tickets, so it would take me a couple of hours. And then I discovered this automation that would do it all for me. So obviously I automated that part for myself, and then I enjoyed it for like a couple of weeks. Like everybody was still doing it manually, and I was sitting here like, but eventually I did tell them, and I'm like, hey guys, look, I stumbled upon this thing. I did it for myself and tested it for a couple of weeks. It seems to be working fine. So why don't you guys check it out and let me know if I should enable it for all of the other agents? And they're like, there's automation in this? Like, yeah. And that's kind of how it started. They're like, oh, okay, can you like take a look at this other process and take a look at this other process? And just eventually it turned into this whole like, hey, let's have you be our operations manager because
nice.
You seem to know the softwares. And I'm like, I don't, but I just kind of look. because if it makes my life easier, then it's worth it for me to spend. It's that other saying, like, hey, if somebody it gave me 2 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend like the first hour and a half just sharpening the axe.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think about it. Like, hey, if you're giving me a task, I will spend at least half of the time researching how to do this task in the most efficient way possible.
See, this is actually, when I'm listening to people that are entrepreneurs or in business, coaches, whatever, I always think of like commonality. Like I think back to previous conversations I've had with others on this podcast and stuff. And there was a recent one, and I can't off the top of my head think of who it was. But I remember they got in trouble because they started hacking something like in their, like they were working for a company, and they started hacking and finding, I think they were in kind of in the same pursuit. Like, was it Cristina?
Yes, it was. 100%.
Yeah, so go listen to her thing, because it was a similar thing where, and she got in trouble though. I think she got suspended for like 3 days. She came back and she got a promotion. So it's kind of that. It's this common thread with people like us who are, especially when you're working for, you're in the wrong place when you're working for somebody and you're looking, deeper into the systems to find better ways, more efficient ways to do things, but at least it sounds like you didn't get in trouble though. You were good.
Because what I was doing wasn't necessarily like breaking any terms of service or anything like that. Like it wasn't anything like in the gray hat area. It was like literally features of the software that I dug into and nobody else bothered to do. And that's really it. That's
awesome. So then you saw the power of automations and things. I use Zendesk too, and there's a lot of automations in there and stuff you can build in where you could do it manually, but so I mean, even when I'm setting up appointments and stuff, there's things we can do to automate things and make life easier. So where does that take you from there?
Pretty much I opened my own business out of necessity rather than anything else. I kept freelancing for a while, and then like just more and more people came, just organically, referrals and everything. And at some point I'm like, this is turning into a business. Regardless of whether I wanted to or not, it's turning into a business. So I might as well make the most of it and do the whole thing.
That's a good problem to have. Yeah, when you're.
It is.
So, were you still working at this place when you were doing this on the side, or was it focused on helping people with improving their efficiency and their processes and all that?
Yeah,
right out of the gates?
That was my focus. Initially, so the first company that I started was actually a graphic design agency. It was just one of my pleasures in life, little things that make us happy. Mm-hmm. So I opened that. Didn't really go very well. I knew nothing about running a business. I knew stuff about like how to organize it. I knew my trade, so I knew how to do graphic design, but I didn't know anything about marketing or sales or like I was a total noob about everything. So unsurprisingly, that didn't go very well, but it did set me on an interesting path, because as soon as I realized that there was this whole world of knowledge that I did not know about, I started learning about it and hanging out in the right communities and just starting getting to know people, and that's how I got from that to where I am now. My first ever client for my company was somebody who, like, I had just went through the whole digital marketing certifications, and I posted in their group and I was like, hey guys, I basically completed all this certifications and have all this knowledge, but I don't know how to like practically apply it. I don't know how to practice any of it. So is anybody in here willing to kind of, be my mentor, and in exchange, here's what my superpower is, here's what I know how to do. I can help you with your operations, streamline your processes, and blah, blah, blah. And that's how we ended up working together, and we are still working together now, like 4.5 years later.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, so it started as a trade, an exchange of services, but it quickly evolved into like probably one of the best working relationships that I have to date.
Wow. Okay, so your do you work with? So this is an agency you hooked up with, another agency.
Yeah. He has his own marketing agency.
Okay.
So he already knew the digital marketing space,
Right.
but he was willing to kind of let me practice it inside of his agency, so
Nice.
I can learn the stuff with practical application. And in return, I would look at his processes and document, automate the stuff that I know how to do.
Yeah. Oh, nice. And then that grew out of that grew. You getting other clients and stuff like that, and
Yeah. Exactly.
So were there any? What were some of the biggest challenges you saw, like working with other people, other agencies or businesses, that when you first talked to them, what do you think were they completely missing the idea of systems and processes, or they knew they should be doing it and aren't doing it? How do you corral busy people to think about this and get excited about it?
Most people know that they need it, but most people have the information just lying in their head, and they just don't really know how to get it out of there. So it's really a process of asking the right questions in order to be able to extract that information out of their head. Like for some people, it's like pulling teeth, because they're just not used to thinking in a very structured way.
Right.
They're very creative people. They like thinking like strategically and high picture, and it's very hard to get them to like focus on the details. Like, hey, pay really well attention. What was the next thing you did? I'm like, it's hard to pull that level of detail out of them sometimes. So there's like tips and tricks to making sure that you get the information out of them. But yeah, most people already know that they need it, and they are willing to invest the time to streamline their process, because they know that there's really no other way to scale. Most people know that there isn't like that one simple trick that's gonna help you scale. That's not really it with operations, especially. It's a lot of hard work over time that just builds up into you being eventually able to scale and get a lot more of your time back.
Yeah, and there's a lot of benefits to it for sure, and scale is one of them. Being able to do more and what. So that's it's amazing, because there's so many there's so many people doing businesses. And there's a lot of different personality types, and there's different types of businesses that attract different personality types. And and it's logical that some people just don't have that organization skill in their brain. One of the things, thinking back in my history, when I was doing even simple things like I used to coach people with affiliate marketing and pay-per-click advertising. And I created a system to be able to do that, test markets and do all this stuff. One of the things I built into that system that I think a lot of people appreciated was the fact that I built in the systems and processes that they could follow step by step to execute on what I was coaching them. So it's replicable. It was something that was consistent. It could be refined over time, and it's the same way with any business as well. It's like you're just building these things that. So taking that, from that point, what are the real benefits of somebody? Well, first of all, before we get to the benefits, let's talk about what. Can you define what systems and processes are? Because systems and processes are two different things. Can you define that a little bit more, and what's really involved, and where does documentation, all that kind of fit into it as well? How does, let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So the way to kind of use an analogy, I think of a system as like if you had a restaurant business, your system is basically your business, is how you have a restaurant, it's how your restaurant operates. Your processes are the things that make up your system. It's like, hey, it's our food making process. It's our, the process of how you supply the restaurant with the groceries and everything that they need to make the food. It's the process of how you set the tables and all of that. So all of those little things that are standalones, but together they make up the experience of eating inside of your restaurant. Then your standard operating procedures, for example, would be the recipes that your cook uses in order to, cook the food and to make sure that it tastes the same. If he makes the same dish 1,000 times, he uses a recipe to make sure that 1,000 times tastes exactly the same, so that people return to your restaurant because they liked it the first time and they expect that the second time they'll like it just as much. So you have to be able to provide a consistent level of service, and the only way you can do that is if you know what you did the first time, so that you can do it again the second time and the third time, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I think about systems, processes, standard operating procedures, and how they work together to create the dining experience just the business experience, somebody working with you.
That is a beautiful analogy, actually.
Does that make sense?
100%. Like that. And you can, if you think about all the restaurants you've been to, over time, you go out to restaurants, like me and my wife go out all the time. We love, well, not all the time. Once a week, probably, we're going to a restaurant because it's something we enjoy doing. But all the restaurants you go to, you can tell the ones that have those systems, processes, and the SOPs, the recipes, nailed. Where it's a consistent experience every single time. Even the service is consistent.
Exactly.
So there's a particular restaurant that I go to, an Italian restaurant, where we actually pick up, and we'll go pick up some food. It's the same person, literally for like the last 2 years. That same person. I drive up, they see me, they come out, and they have this beautiful process to deliver that food to me, and it's like in the quality of the food, everything is always the same. But again, you go to some other restaurants over time, food gets worse. The service is all over the place, and you don't know what you're getting. So,
yeah.
And seeing that now, how that could apply to any business, is that's the same situation. I love how because I was thinking documentation, but like SOPs, that's something I learned in the corporate world, what SOPs were. I didn't learn that until about 10 years ago or 8 years ago. What's an SOP? Standard operating procedures, which are, can you tell us a little bit about what is documentation? What does that look like? And how, do you need any special tools for that, special systems? Do you write it down with a pencil and paper, or is there like tools you can use for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, the documentation, standard operating procedures, these are, like we said before, your recipes. These are the how-to manuals for how you do every single repeatable, standardized task inside of your company, from like running payroll to your fulfillment processes, and pretty much everything inside of your business should have like an instructions, here's how you do this thing. Now, they can be from very simple, like just a list of steps, to a little bit more complex, where you kind of also define, hey, what are the prerequisites to be able to do this task, who's responsible for it, FAQs related to do this, like what are some things that people typically ask about this process. So you can start from like the very basic, just to have something to start with, and then just add those details over time. What was your other question? Special tools. Again, you can use special tools if you want. Pen and paper will work, but typically we do this, we do create these documents and standard operating procedures in order to delegate work. So it'd probably be best, especially if you're working online and your employees are not necessarily in office, it's probably better to have it like in the cloud somewhere. So you can use something as simple as Google Docs or Word Docs. They work perfectly. There is literally no problem with just having your SOPs as a collection of Google Docs inside of your drive. Literally no problem. It's the perfect solution. I typically store them in my project management system. I use ClickUp. That's where I store them. That's where my people know how to find them. And I've recently discovered this tool called Tango, which I really liked. It's a Google Chrome extension, and what it does is it kind of writes the SOPs for you. Like you press record or start or something like that, and as you're actually doing the work, it kind of records the steps and writes them down for you. So once you press stop recording, you already have the process documented and written out. It's really, really cool. It functions really well. And of course, you're going to have to tweak some wordings here and there. And also takes screenshots, so that's super useful too, and just puts them there. It is able to store the documents inside of it or export them as PDFs or Google Docs or whatever you want. So that is one nifty tool that I found that has been really, really helpful. And I think for people who are not used to documenting processes, it can be a very good starting point.
Oh, wow. I gotta check that out. That sounds cool. I like automation. Sounds like a little AI involved there and stuff. And then in terms of, it's called multimedia too, because you can use, oftentimes, like when I'm putting a document together for a process, you're using screenshots, sometimes just a video to complement it, because it's easier to just show those things.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so let's go to processes. Now, can you describe an example of like someone maybe you've helped with processes, and you get the restaurant example. Can you apply that to a business you've worked with where maybe they had something that they needed to improve, that you worked with them on a process to make it better?
Yeah.
What that look like?
Yeah, for sure. I pretty much do that with everybody. So depending on how involved the work ends up being, we can either take like one isolated process. So for example, I did help somebody create a process for doing DISC assessments, if you're familiar with the DISC model. It's the 4 personality types test, but it's typically used in businesses and in sales to kind of, there's these 4 personality types, the D, the I, the S, and the C. That's where the DISC comes from, sorry. And they're able to coach salespeople differently depending on where on that spectrum they land, something like that. I think Tony Robbins popularized the concept.
Surprised they haven't heard it.
Ago, like years ago.
Yeah.
I also helped them with like a podcast process. So since you're more familiar with that, I would assume we can take that one as an example. And I like it because it's somewhat compartmentalized. I hope I pronounced that right. Not a native speaker, so. What we first do is I like to create process maps. I use a flowcharting tool, and I just visually build the process. And we start with like very, very high level, like what does a 10,000 foot view look like? Well, first you find a guest, then you maybe do an initial interview to, make sure that they're a good fit. Then you record the episode, then you edit the episode, and then you publish the episode. So those are your 5 high-level steps. You put those on the flowchart, and then you go one layer deeper, and you take each one of them in turn and break them into like 3 to 5 other steps, smaller steps. And I go to the first one, finding a guest. Well, how does that really work? Well, I have like 5 networks that I typically go to, and I may be doing some posts, or there's people that I ask to suggest guests. Like there's these 3 ways that I get guests. Great. We document those. Maybe we have email templates or post templates, so we can go as deep as we want. Then we go to the second step. Now we're in the vetting process. What does the vetting process look like? Well, first we invite them for the initial interview. What does that look like? Well, we have a Calendly event, we set it up, we send them an email after the Calendly event, we have an itinerary maybe for the actual interview itself, we have maybe a list of like guidelines or requirements for like, hey, what makes somebody a good fit? So that's pretty important. And then the process breaks into two. What do you do if somebody is not a good fit? And then what do you do if somebody is a good fit? So you go to each branch and you continue this process of just documenting what happens, and you just go one layer deeper every single time. So by the end, you will have this flowchart with a lot of steps, and then you can kind of take a step back, optimize it, see if there's stuff that you can do better or more efficiently. And then what I like to do is like, hey, which parts of these can be automated? Which parts of these should be automated, if any? Then I take a look at the parts that will be manual, and I'm going to be like, hey, can we write a standard operating procedures? Can we have a template? Can we have like, how can we make this easier? How can we make this foolproof? How can we make it so that if somebody else took care of this little part, they would be able to do it as well as I can?
Yeah.
And then it just kind of all begins to tie together.
I love the visualization too. Do you use I use mind maps a lot for this type of thing, and I've built out whole processes using that because it's all about branching, and it's also a very iterative process, right? I mean, the first time you sit down and you create a flow and a process, that can be tweaked over time. It's kind of like a live document. And the first few times you're going to miss a few things and got to keep revisiting it, but that's also kind of how you can improve over time. Kaizen, continuous improvement.
Exactly.
So, no, that's...
Yeah, they're supposed to be living, breathing documents. It's recommended that you take a look at every process and SOP and automation that you have inside of your business, like on a quarterly basis, so like every 3 months. Just take another peek in there, make sure it's still relevant, make sure nothing has changed. And even if nothing has changed, this quarterly review is a good opportunity to be like, should something change? But hey, we haven't updated this process in 6 months. Have we really not gotten any better or any more efficient in 6 months? Like, maybe it's time to...
That's right, yeah. And a lot of this is about habits, too, and how you think about things. And again, everyone's got a different personality, so if you can't do this, you'll definitely find somebody like you or like somebody that can, in your organization, add someone to your team to help. But so much of it is habits. And like when I look at something... I periodically look at it like, is there a way I can automate this? I ask that question all the time. Can I improve this process? This seems like can I decrease the time it takes to do this particular item? Especially if you're doing something repeatable. Every time you're recreating something, whether it's an email or whatever, it's like, let's make a template of that and let's create a process to add that template and stuff. I'm big on automations. Like, do you? What type of automation tools do you use or recommend and stuff? Because like I use things like what's the name of it? What do I think? Zapier and then we have we use Monday.com, but we use other systems and stuff too to help automate and create automations and stuff to make things just happen or remind us to do things and stuff like that. Any other tools you use?
Yeah. Well, the first place I look is within the software the software itself. Most softwares today have some level of native automation capabilities, like just built in. And I like to use those because if it's a closed system, like if I only need an automation that involves Monday.com, like, hey, if I create a task in Monday, then I need something else to happen also in Monday, it's probably best to keep the automation in Monday because it's less prone to give out errors and all that. But if you're gonna involve multiple different softwares, then something like what you mentioned, Zapier or Integromat or Pabbly are are your best bet. They're like
Yeah,
the
they really
Scotch
are.
Tape of the internet.
Yeah, and if no one someone that's not familiar with what Zapier is, it's basically an automation tool that can connect thousands of different systems together to something happens over here, it'll trigger something, trigger something to happen over here. It's a beautiful thing to tie things together, and we won't go too deep into that when we get too technical and geeky, and people will nod off. This is exciting for people like us, but we gotta make this exciting somehow.
Sleep, people. Don't fall asleep. Just try to pronounce it. Never be
I'm gonna lose sleep tonight over that. That's one of the questions, right? Like, with all this, we could talk about systems too, but that's just basically a package of processes and stuff, and it's really the structure around our processes, right? There's not a whole lot more you can probably say there. Or maybe you could. But one of the things I'm really curious about, I talk about how we can make this exciting. I mean, how do you make it exciting? How do you get somebody that's really, they're not seeing the forest through the trees kind of analogy, like where they're so into their work and doing all this stuff and they don't have time. They're worried about the marketing, getting people, the sales and invoicing and taking care of clients and all this stuff. It's like, how do you get their attention to get excited about this and take some action towards something? I mean, how do you communicate to them that this is something they should get excited about?
Okay, so maybe unpopular opinion here, but I don't consider the work itself of creating processes and operations and stuff. I don't think that's exciting to everybody, and I don't think it can be, especially if you're a founder. You're probably somebody who's very creative and just a visionary, and those types of people, regardless of how hard I'm gonna try, are not gonna find this exciting. What they're gonna find exciting is the outcome. So the build out process, they're not gonna care about it. They're probably not even gonna want to do it themselves because it's just not fun. They love focusing on all of the other stuff, like you said. But the outcome is what makes it worth it. It makes all this nitty gritty button pushing to be worth it. It's knowing that instead of, taking 3 months to onboard a new employee, you might take 1 month and they've already become a productive member of your team. It's knowing that when you wake up in the morning, instead of waking up to like 5 unread Slack messages and 5 emails from your clients of something that's broken and needs immediate attention, you know that you could just go and drink your coffee and, relax and just start working on something that you have planned and that, high leverage activity. You know that you can leave and take your family on a 2-week vacation and you won't have to spend the 2 weeks in your hotel room working on your laptop while your spouse and your kids are having fun at the beach. It's those types of outcomes, that are getting us excited and making it worth it. You know that what's making you excited is that, you're basically going to have increased capacity. Like your team is in time going to be able to handle things more efficiently. They're going to be able to do things in less time, which will open up more spots for you to work with more people, which is how you scale. You're going to be able to, instead of having 5 clients, you're going to be able to have 10 clients. And next month, you're going to hire 1 extra person instead of 2, and you're going to be able to have 20
That's
clients.
That's exactly how we get excited about it. Yeah.
It's little things, little outcomes that compound over time, and in the end, they will eventually bring us to that image of the entrepreneur sitting in the hammock in their backyard or on some beach somewhere sipping margaritas, because that's where we're kind of lured into starting our own businesses with that image in mind of like, well, instead of the office job working 40 hours a week, you're going to sit at home sipping margaritas, you're going to work 4 hours a week, and you're going to be a millionaire. And everybody's like, oh yeah, I want that. And next thing you know, you're working 60 to 80 hours a week for less money that you had at your corporate job, at least for a while. And you're like, how did I get here exactly?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yes, it is.
Is this my life now?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's funny, you say going into business for yourself in the beginning, like everything changes too over time. As your business scales, as your team grows, you're going to need more and more processes. You're going to need, but in the beginning, first few years, probably, you're going to be very involved with everything. And so this is a process of looking at different parts of your business as it grows, as things evolve. And okay, now how do I create systems and process around that and give that to somebody else as part of it too, and get those consistent results and all that stuff. I think about that almost daily. Where am I headed? What am I doing? How can I build these things? Because for me, it's important to just like a lot of businesses. Not that I plan on selling my business any day soon, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, but someday. And it's really important that I start to extract myself from the day-to-day operations and make sure I have a team in place that if I do slip away to the islands for a week or two, that no one will notice. Or focus more on strategy and the vision and all that stuff, and have other people doing the other things. So I think that is, and you're right. I mean, like I could say I get really excited about systems and processes and creating documentation. I get excited when they're done, or when I use them, where I can just point somebody or hire somebody and be like, I got everything all ready to go here. Just follow that. So you get excited after you do it. But yeah, like a lot of tasks, the doing it can be a little dry. And but yeah, this is a great conversation. I think it's a important, like I said, an important component to every business. And if somebody's feeling stuck, they feel like they're just too much into their business and things are a mess, or they every time they hire somebody they have to start over. This is stuff they should be thinking about. So now you help people do this. Obviously, you're a coach. You got an awesome site, by the way. I really like your site. Because I'm a web designer, developer, I look at people and I'm like, gosh, somebody did a really, really nice job on this site. But you do coaching. And so how can somebody get in touch with you or inquire about getting your help with their systems and processes and improving and finding themselves on a hammock someday on an island on a beach?
That's cute. You can go to my website. It's beproductive.eu, and that's B with 2 E's. Entire branding is based on bees for some reason. Funny story behind that one, actually. We have a combination of done with you, done for you, and do-it-yourself solutions. So regardless of where you're at right now, there are ways to get to the sipping margaritas on the beach, regardless of like budget or anything like that. So there's solutions in there. We offer a free clarity call for everybody once, so you can see that up on the website. It's a 15-minute call with me personally. You get to ask me any question you want, and I will answer it and provide some clarity. And from there, basically, it's whatever you want it to be.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.